Henry Nouwen has this idea, and he says that that which is most personal is in fact most oftentimes most universal. And so this morning what I want to do is share a little bit of my experience and my journey with you as it relates to this issue. And the important thing is not that it is my journey or our journey here in Oklahoma. The important thing is I hope and pray that you'll be able to find your journey and your experience in it as well and garner some encouragement and some insight. So my background is local church ministry. I've been in a couple different church planting contexts in downtown Oklahoma City over the past number of years. One of these church planting experiences was unique. It was an extremely well-funded church plant. We had one family in particular that was underwriting the expense of the entire staff and all of the overhead associated with planting a church. So that afforded us some wonderful and unique opportunities. And so as we built a team to launch this church in the center of our city, the question that we were asked and the question that we were asking of one another was not, what is your role within this organization or this local church or this church plant? The question that we were asked was, what is your role within the kingdom of God here in this city at this time and in this place? It's a unique question to be asked as a late 20-something who feels a strong sense of call to place, whose love for his context and his city transcends climate or culture. And so in the attempt to steward that very rare opportunity well, I began asking a series of questions that went like this. What is the most pressing issue facing my city and my state? As a person who feels called to be a voice of unity in the church at large and an advocate for the poor, I began to continue to ask questions like, what are the kinds of issues that no single church or organization can take on alone? And as an extension of that question, what are the kinds of issues that will require a true act of unity on the part of the church if we're ever going to make a measurable impact? And so I embarked on a journey. I jumped headfirst into each and every social issue that you can imagine, and it was a steep learning curve. I got to know leaders, I got to know agencies, organizations. I immersed myself in the urban context of our city, and I began to realize that there was an underside of the city that I had not yet been exposed to. And the story that was being told by the Chamber of Commerce in my city was not the full, complete, true story of our city. And I became aware of acute need for the very first time. So as I began to seek to answer those questions, it didn't take me very long to realize that there was something about the way that we were treating or not treating our children in our state that got my attention. And what I began to realize is that year after year, we ranked pitifully low in terms of what they call the overall well-being of our children, and that got my attention. It got my attention because of an idea that I had come across by the late Nelson Mandela, who says this: there is no keener revelation of the condition of a society than the way in which it treats its children. Now that's a mouthful, so I want to say it again. He says, there is no keener revelation of the condition of a society than the way in which it treats its children. So if that's true, and I believe it to be, it led me to ask another series of questions. So in a city that is experiencing unprecedented cultural and economic renewal at every level, how are we actually doing? What is the true health and vitality of our city? What's the fuller story? Yes, there are a litany of accolades that could be found on the Chamber of Commerce website, but is that really telling us how healthy we may or may not be. And this idea from Mandela would lead us to believe that our society is not well. In fact, it is quite sick, perhaps fatally so. But it's not enough for us to shrink back from society and hurl stones at it and call it sick and twisted in terms of the way that it does or does not care for its children. We, the church, the people of God, we don't get off quite that easy. There's this other idea from the late Chuck Colson. He says this, that culture is religion incarnate. Culture is religion incarnate. And if you have a sick culture, it's because you have a sick church. So I believe that the condition and the way that we treat our children in our cities and in our states and all across this country, it is not just indicative of the condition of society as a whole. It is actually much more indicative of the condition of the church. And I think it's safe to say that as it relates to that idea, we are not perhaps as healthy as we may think we are, and that perhaps we might be quite sick, even fatally so. And so what this led me to was the issue of foster care. I explored child homelessness and hunger and incarceration rates of women and out of wedlock birth and single parenting and on and on and on we could go. And the single issue that rose to the surface time and time again was that of foster care. And I found it to be a very strategic issue to be engaged, because when I bumped up against foster care, I bumped up against all the rest. And as I leaned into foster care, what I began to experience is what I describe as an organic groundswell of activity in the church around this issue that I was not yet aware of. And so the church began to show up very faithfully and humbly and consistently into this foster care and adoption space with a heart and a posture to serve. And the conversation began kind of internally among the church at large in the city. Perhaps we might be the solution to this problem. There's a novel idea, right? But what I'm thankful for in retrospect is that the church did not parade around town presenting itself as the solution to the problem. Instead, it showed up again humbly and faithfully and sought to serve as opposed to be served. That ought to sound familiar. The beauty of what my experience has shown me and our experience to date is that the Department of Human Services began to come to the same conclusion, that perhaps the faith community is the solution to the problem at hand. And so our government leaders at the highest level, they convened a meeting and they said, we need more and better families in our state. And we believe that the faith community is the best place to go get these much needed families, but we don't know how to do that. Will you help us? The easy answer to that question was yes. And it wasn't, will you, Ben, help us? It wasn't you, founding partners of a new organization, will you help us? It was, will you, church? Will you, family of God? Will you, bride of Christ? Will you, Christ's body? The fullness of him who fills everything in every way. Will you be who you are called to be? And the easy answer to that was yes, we will. There's this idea from French novelist Victor Hugo, and I'll close with this. He says, there is nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. There is nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. And I believe that you also believe, that the church, in all of its many diverse, vast expressions, the church, high church, low church, the church, mega church, house church, right? That the church in all of its many expressions, changing the face of foster care, is an idea whose time has come.